In the heart of the sun-drenched village of Kuzani lived a woman named Nabira, known by all for her kindness and quiet strength. Her hands worked from dawn till dusk helping neighbors, tending crops, nursing sick children who weren't hers, and still finding time to smile at anyone who crossed her path. Her voice, soft like morning dew, was always the first sound that greeted the waking sun. But her husband, Bako, was a man carved from pride and stone. Tall, with a commanding face, Bako sat daily beneath the iroko tree at the center of the village. Square, gossiping with idle men, laughing loud, and returning home with no sweat on his brow. He refused to lift a finger to help Nabira, either in the house or on the farm. He hurled insults like stones. "You useless woman! You are not a queen. Here, I married you to serve me, not to rest under my roof." And Nabira, with her heart of water, endured it all, never raising her voice, never stepping away from her duty. Bako wouldn't even offer money to buy food. It was Nabira who tilled the land, harvested cassava and yams, walked miles to sell them at the Defuna market, and still returned with enough to cook for him. One night, when the rain fell in sheets and the thunder roared over the hills, Bako kicked her awake. "Get up, lazy woman," he shouted. "The sky is giving us water, and our drums are empty. What will I use to bathe in the morning? Get out and fetch water before it stops." Nabira sat up, her bones aching. She whispered, "Bako, please, each time I go into the rain, I fall ill. Let me wait till morning." But Bako's ears were closed. He shoved her toward the door and locked it behind her, leaving her alone in the cold storm. All night she remained outside, soaked and shivering, filling pot after pot as lightning cracked above her. The next morning, she collapsed on her mat, her body burning with fever. "Bako," she pleaded, "please help me buy herbs from the healer. I feel very sick." Bako looked at her with contempt. "You want me to waste my money on you? Instead of preparing breakfast, you lie there pretending." And without another word, he left for the square, never even checking her again. As the days crawled by, Nabira's illness worsened. Her skin lost its color, her voice faded to a whisper, and her body withered. The villagers began to notice. Even the children who played near her hut grew quiet when they passed. The elders of Kuzani gathered and came to offer herbs and cooked meals, but Bako stood in the doorway and waved them off. "She is my wife," he snapped. "I can care for her myself. Did I beg you people for help?" Still he did nothing. Even as Nabira lost the strength to sit up, even as her eyes dulled with pain, Bako remained blind with arrogance. Then came Grandmother Doya, the oldest herbalist in Kuzani, her back bent by age but her mind sharp as a blade. She stood beside Nabira's mat and begged Bako, "Let me treat her. Let me help." But he only scoffed, "She will recover. Leave us." And so the villagers, with heavy hearts, watched the gentle flower of their village wilt in silence. They whispered among themselves, knowing Bako's stubbornness would cost him dearly. But no one could force the will of a man who thought himself above wisdom. Nabira, once so full of light, now laid in the shadow of death alone, unloved and uncared for. Then one still morning, while birds chirped in the mango trees, Nabira drew her final breath. It slipped from her like smoke in the wind, quiet and unnoticed. When the news spread, Kuzani fell into mourning. Men gathered to prepare her for burial, while women stirred pots of okra and yam for the morning feast. The village buzzed with sorrow, but one figure stood still, Bako, cold as ever, eyes empty. He didn't weep. He didn't bow his head. He merely watched the burial arrangements like an outsider at a stranger's funeral. Even the breeze seemed to hush in his presence, disturbed by his silence. Nabira's short life had touched so many, yet the man she shared her home with showed no grief, no regret. Their daughter, Zua, only 12, sat near the fire, clutching her knees. She had seen too much for one so young, Something wasn't right. Little Zina, barely 12, sat quietly beside her mother's wrapped body, her face soaked in silent tears. Her father, Bako, remained stone-faced, his stillness cutting deeper than any cry. The warmth Nabira had poured into their home was now a memory fading with the wind. The villagers busied themselves with preparations. On the morning of the burial, a rusted old ambulance arrived to carry Nabira's body to her chosen resting place, the banks of River Uloko, a sacred ground where she had always said she wanted to sleep forever. The sky was cloudy, and the air heavy as her wooden casket was placed into the back of the ambulance. A hush fell over the village. It wasn't just grief, they all felt something was amiss. The ambulance rumbled forward, but after only a few meters down the dusty red path, it choked and stalled. The driver turned the key again and again, but the engine refused to stir. Villagers gathered around, offering help, pushing from all sides. But the vehicle didn't move an inch. An elder poured libation palm wine laced with herbs onto the earth, whispering to the ancestors, but still, the wheels were stuck as though the ground itself refused to let the body pass. "This is no ordinary delay," murmured one old woman. "The spirit of Nabira is unsettled." The elders, those who had seen many strange days, began muttering among themselves. "Perhaps she is not ready to leave," said one. "Or perhaps she demands justice." All eyes turned to Bako, who stood at the back like a carved statue. He said nothing. The village men, their arms strong from years of farming, decided to carry the casket themselves. But as they lifted it, something stranger happened. The casket resisted the road ahead and twisted their path toward the dense bush. No matter how hard they tried, it kept pulling them sideways, away from the river. The men strained to control it, their brows dripping with sweat, but the casket had a will of its own. Whispers filled the air like swarming bees. "The ancestors are speaking," someone said. For hours they walked, but the casket continued its silent rebellion, dragging them toward thickets and unmarked paths. By mid-afternoon, the sky darkened as though night was coming early, and fear hung like smoke above their heads. "We will not reach the river by sunset," one man panted. In the village square, Bako finally spoke. "Keep going, it will sort itself out." But his words were hollow, and the villagers could feel it. Around the 5th hour, Elder Ose, whose eyes were clouded, but whose mind remained sharp, stepped forward and said, "Call Zina. Her mother's soul may still hear her voice." The child, who had not left her mother's side during her illness, was brought before the casket. She stepped forward quietly, barefoot, her heart beating like a drum. The crowd silenced as she approached. The air grew still, the trees ceased to sway, and even the birds seemed to stop singing. Zina stood before her mother's resting place and placed a trembling hand upon the wood. Her voice, soft but unwavering, spoke through the air like wind. Through grass, "Mama, you gave us everything. Your hands were never idle, and your heart held us all. I will carry your love, I will honor you, but please, let us carry you home. Rest now, Mama. Let your spirit find peace." As soon as her fingers touched the casket, a hush fell, and then the casket shifted. Slowly, it aligned itself toward the river path as if it had heard and understood. The villagers gasped, some dropping to their knees. The casket, once stubborn, now moved with grace, guided not by force but by love. They followed silently, through the fading light of dusk, until they reached the riverbank. The moon rose above them, casting silver across the water. Beneath the baobab tree, Nabira was laid to rest, wrapped in the cloth of her ancestors, while the people whispered prayers for her soul. That night, the village gathered around a great fire, their faces lit by flame and memory. They spoke of the strange signs, the casket's refusal, the stillness that broke only when Zina's voice was heard. At the edge of the gathering, Bako sat alone. His face was still cold, but those who watched him closely noticed his hands. They trembled when Zina spoke. His pride had poisoned his soul, and now, in front of all, it had been cracked open. Elder Asay rose again, his voice clear. Over the crackling fire. "This is no tale of ghost or spirit alone," he said. "It is a lesson. A man who disrespects the giver of life invites the wrath of the ancestors." The flames flickered as if in agreement. And in the silence that followed, the villagers understood they had not just buried a woman. They had witnessed a reckoning. The villagers sat in a ring around the fire. Their faces cast an amber glow as the weight of Nabira's love and the burden of Bako's neglect hung heavy in the night air. Elder Ose's voice cut through the silence like a slow drumbeat, his words firm but tender. "Spirits," he said, "cannot be mocked." This unrest, this strange resistance, was not just about the dead refusing rest. It was about the living, failing to honor life. He paused and looked at Bako, whose eyes remained on the dusty ground. "You have lost a wife," the elder said, "but if you gain no wisdom from this, then you have lost far more." Bako didn't speak, but his shoulders lowered. The truth had pierced him deeply. He had been cold, unmoved by Nabira's illness, her pain, or even her final breath. The cursed journey to her burial, the casket's stubborn refusal, and Zina's pure plea had stirred something deep inside him, something he had buried for years beneath pride. He remembered, painfully, that he had never truly loved Nabira. He had been forced by his mother to marry her, bound to the daughter of her closest friend, while his heart belonged elsewhere. Still, that was no excuse for the cruelty he had shown. She didn't deserve this, he thought. She never did. And so, under the orange moon, he learned a bitter lesson that no one is born an island, and love without care is a wound that deepens in silence. As the fire cracked, some of the elder women began to hum a song, an old lament sung by generations of mourners. Their voices rose like smoke, soft and mournful, the melody drifting through the trees and into the heavens. It was a song of remembrance, of spirits carried by wind and memory. It was for Nabira, who had loved so many, asked for so little, and died surrounded by everything but warmth. Bako looked up, and in the flicker of flame, the shame on his face was unmistakable. He had taken her for granted. She had worked not just for him, but for their children, for the very roots of the village. And he had done nothing but sit beneath the iroko tree while she withered away. A silence wrapped around the fire, a space waiting to be filled. Bako stood slowly, walked forward, and fell to his knees beside Zina. His voice cracked as he spoke. "My daughter, I failed you. I failed your mother. I should have listened. I should have cared. I see now. I see everything. Forgive me." Zina turned to face him. Though young, her eyes held the sorrow of a woman who had seen too. Much too soon. She stared at him for what felt like forever, and then she spoke softly. "Papa, saying sorry is only the beginning. You must show love, not just to me, but to Mama's spirit. You must change." Her words were simple, but they hit him like rain on dry earth. He nodded, understanding now that apologies meant nothing without transformation. The days that followed were not easy. Grief curled around Bako like a shadow. But slowly, painfully, he began to change. He no longer sat idly under the tree. Instead, he joined Zina in the fields, working the same soil Nabira once tilled with blistered hands. He fetched water before dawn, repaired the fence around their home, and cooked small meals for his children, things he had never thought to do before. He helped the elders repair their roofs, mended old feuds with neighbors, and apologized one by one to all those he had wronged with his pride. At first, the villagers watched with caution, unsure if the change was real. But they began to see it in his actions, in how he carried his daughter's books to the village school, how he sat beside the widow Ao and helped her grind maize, how he kept Nabira's small herb garden alive. One afternoon, as he walked through the quiet fields with sweat on his back and dust on his feet, Nabira, the old village healer, approached him. Her wrinkled face bore the wisdom of decades, and her eyes held a knowing light. "From the day Nabira passed," she said, "I knew. It was not the end of a woman's journey. It was the beginning of yours." Nabira spoke with the calm weight of one who had seen many moons pass. "I see your change," she said gently, her voice like rustling leaves. "You've begun to learn the hardest lesson of all, to respect. Not only those you love, but the sacrifices they make. But remember, true respect doesn't begin with others. It begins within. If your heart does not change, your actions will always fall short." Her words settled over Bako like a heavy cloak. For hours after, he sat by his fire, turning her wisdom over in his mind. He realized that changing his behavior wasn't enough. He had to understand why he had allowed himself to become so cruel, so cold, so blind. He needed to forgive himself, to see worth in others and in the simplest blessings: morning rain, a daughter's laughter, the warmth of shared meals. As the weeks unfolded, Bako worked quietly and steadily toward becoming a man his wife might have been proud of. The people of Kuzani, slow to trust, watched his transformation with cautious eyes. While they would never forget what Nabira had endured, they began to see a man slowly breaking free from his own hardened shell. And then, one day beneath the same iroko tree where Bako had once wasted his days in idleness, Zina approached him. She stood tall now, her step surer, her eyes deeper with wisdom than her years. "Papa," she said gently, "you've done many good things. You're trying, and I'm proud of you. But there's still one more thing to do. You need to go to Mama's grave. You must speak to her spirit, not from fear, but from truth. You need to say sorry from your heart." Bako looked at her, his chest tight with both gratitude and dread. Could he face the earth that cradled the woman he had once ignored, now knowing she had given her soul for him and the children? But he knew Zina was right. So the next morning, with slow and steady hands, he gathered an offering: bright hibiscus, flowers, sweet oranges, kola nuts, and a small gourd of aromatic palm spirit. He walked to the resting place beside River Uloko, where soft water always whispered and tall grasses swayed. Standing there, he listened to the wind, to the birds, to his own heart beating like a drum of truth. Then, in a whisper, he said, "Nabira, I failed you. I see it now. I should have cared. I should have loved. I promise I will raise our children with the strength and gentleness you always carried. I beg you, let your spirit rest in peace." For a while, only silence answered him. But then, a sudden breeze picked up, swirling the leaves into a graceful dance. And in that wind, Bako felt something unspoken, a release, a forgiveness, a peace long denied. From that day forward, the village slowly returned to its natural rhythm. Bako stayed close to home, working side by side with Zina, who had grown into a caretaker of her siblings with the quiet pride her mother once held. Though the villagers never forgot what had happened, they saw the man Bako was becoming. And they respected the effort. The strange day when Nabira's casket refused to move became a tale passed down from old mouths to young ears, not just about one man's cruelty, but about how the spirits watch and how they speak when they must. It became a lesson about redemption, that no one is beyond change, and that healing, though slow, is always possible when the heart is willing. Around fires and at moonlit gatherings, the elders told this story not as a warning alone, but as hope that the worst of us can rise if they learn to bend. The final lesson echoed in every version: never take for granted the ones who love you. The ones closest to us are often the ones we hurt the most. And while words matter, it is action that proves love. Spirits are not gone. They are near, listening, judging, waiting for the living to walk in truth. When we disrespect them, unrest follows, but when we honor them, peace finds us. May we all remember Bako's path, not just to mourn Nabira, but to become better for those who still walk beside us. And that is how the tale of Bako and Nabira was remembered in the village of Kuzani, a tale of pride broken, of love rekindled through grief, and of a man who finally understood what it means to respect not only the living, but also the dead.